Wait a second, you're telling me Rasheeda just turned on Yandy? No, seriously, Rasheeda. The same one who's stood by Yandy through years of public chaos, sisterhood breakdowns, and social media blow-ups just switched sides and, not quietly either. This wasn't a passive fade into the background. No, this was explosive, loud, public, humiliating, and the worst part, she did it during a taping right in front of the whole cast and half the crew. Fans couldn't believe it when whispers started flying that Rasheeda had not only sided with Jessica, but went as far as embarrassing Yandy on set like they were strangers in a street fight. And let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. Backstage sources say the moment Rasheeda stepped onto the rehearsal floor, the air changed. She was cold, arms crossed, jaw locked, eyes refusing to meet Yandy's, and she stood there frozen like someone just pulled the rug out from under her whole world. You could see the confusion in her face. You could see the betrayal crawling up her spine. Her voice cracked. Her mascara smudged. Her hands trembled. She didn't need to say it, we already knew. She chose her side, Yandy whispered. Jessica was grinning like she won a crown. Rasheeda had apparently been pulled into Jessica's little alliance, and now, she wasn't just standing beside her, she was chanting with her crew, yelling "We stand together" while Yandy stormed off. Tears streaming down her cheeks like every memory of that so-called friendship was being washed away in real time. This wasn't a reality TV fight anymore. This was real. Behind the cameras, things got even uglier. Yandy sat on a metal chair, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. She looked like she was trying to hold herself together with spit and sheer will. Jock walked over quietly, his voice soft. "Yandy, talk to me," he said, but she shook her head. "She chose Jessica over me," she whispered, like I was nothing. The cameras weren't even rolling, but the drama didn't care. Jessica, always knowing when to twist the knife, walked into frame with that signature smirk. "Did you really think you were untouchable?" she sneered. And that was it. The switch flipped. Yandy's eyes sharpened. Her back straightened. "Untouchable," she fired back. "You're the one who's been playing games since day one." Jessica's smile didn't waver. If anything, she seemed thrilled by the reaction, and then Rasheeda spoke from the shadows. "Enough of this," she said, but her words didn't calm the storm. They fueled it. Yandy spun toward, her voice cracking. "You call this enough?" "After you stood with her," Rasheeda didn't flinch. "I stood for what felt right." "You think this is right? Throwing away years of loyalty for Jessica?" "I think the truth matters more than loyalty to lies," Rasheeda replied, spinning on her heel and walking away like she hadn't just stabbed a sister in the back with a smile. Yandy collapsed against a set wall, and Jock rushed to catch her before she hit the floor. "This is insane," he muttered, and no one disagreed. The entire stage froze. Crew members, castmates, production assistants, everyone just paused. Because in that moment, they all knew something had shifted. A line had been crossed, and there was no walking it back. "She looked me in the eye and lied," Yandy murmured. "She's changed," Jock said. "Or maybe, we're just seeing who she really is." And right then, the director's voice cut through the silence. "We're live in 5. The chaos faded into the background as crew scrambled to hit their marks. But none of them could ignore the storm that had just passed through. The audience in the studio seats, they could feel the energy. Something heavy was in the air. This wasn't entertainment. This was pain, betrayal, and reality bleeding into the script. Yandy pushed Jock aside gently, wiped her face, and walked toward Rasheeda with a fire in her eyes. "You owe me an explanation," she said, loud enough for the cameras to hear. Rasheeda turned slowly outside the makeup trailer, her palm resting against the doorframe. "An explanation?" she echoed. "You want an explanation?" She stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. "I explained already," she spat. "I can't stand by while you hurt everyone for a storyline." Yandy's voice rose. "Hurt everyone? You mean expose lies? Lies?" "No," Rasheeda snapped. "I mean humiliate me. Humiliate the people who trusted you." Tears slid down Yandy's cheeks. "I told the truth, and you turned your back." "I turned my back on deception," Rasheeda said, her voice breaking. "You built an empire on drama. You think this is a game?" Yandy whispered. "This isn't acting. This is my life." Just then, a stagehand shouted, "Places, everyone." And just like that, the spell was broken. Both women turned back toward the stage, their pain now tucked behind TV smiles. But everyone watching knew this was no ordinary scene. Jessica stood on her mark, her energy triumphant, her tone icy. Jock hovered on standby, waiting to intervene if things spiraled again, as the cameras rolled. Jessica launched into her lines like a woman reading her victory speech. Yandy stood silent, but her eyes spoke volumes. She didn't come here to play. She came here to fight for her name, her truth, her story. Backstage, Yandy paced in front of a mirror, the reflection looking back like a stranger. Her lip trembled, her body shook. A knock on the door pulled her back. Jock poked his head in. The publicist wants a statement. No, Yandy said sharply. No sound bites. They need to see the whole picture. I get it, Jock nodded. Just breathe. Yandy pressed her palm against the cold glass and exhaled. I will, she promised. Meanwhile, whispers swirled around the set like wildfire. Did Rasheeda really side with Jessica? I thought Yandy and Rasheeda were like sisters. I can't believe her tears were real. But this wasn't over. Not even close. When the cameras cut, Yandy sank into a chair, her legs trembling. Jock hovered by her side. Money offered a water bottle. Cease stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching it all unfold with narrowed eyes. I never thought Rasheeda would side with her, Yandy said, barely above a whisper. Neither did I, Jock admitted, but she's been under pressure. Jessica's been whispering in her ear for weeks. She chose narrative over friendship, Yandy spat. She's afraid, Money said softly. Afraid of being forgotten. She should be afraid of forgetting who she is, Yandy snapped. A pause. The room held its breath. Then Yandy stood. I need to face her. Jock offered his arm. I'll be right there. Together, they walked down the hall toward Rasheeda's dressing room, each step louder than the last. When they reached the door, Jock knocked softly. Come in, Rasheeda's voice called from inside. The door opened slowly. She stood framed in the glow of vanity lights, eyes red, posture stiff. We need to talk, Yandy said, stepping in. We do? Rasheeda replied, arms crossed. Yandy sat on the small couch. The room felt smaller than ever, tight with tension, thick with unfinished sentences. Jock leaned against the wall. Cease and Money hovered near the door. I feel betrayed, Yandy said. We built something real, and it felt like you erased it in a second. I didn't erase it, Rasheeda said quietly. I watched you spiral. I was scared it would ruin everything we stood for. So you believed Jessica? Yandy asked, pain raw in her voice. She showed me messages, Rasheeda replied. You talking to producers about using drama to chase ratings. About faking breakdowns. They were out of context, Yandy said, her voice rising. I was venting. I should have asked you first, Rasheeda admitted. We all should have talked first, Jock interjected. This could have been cleared up in 5 minutes instead of 5 explosions. If truth matters, Money added, then let's start telling it. I'm not perfect, Yandy said, wiping her eyes. I've made mistakes. I've said harsh things. But I never meant to hurt you. Then why did I feel abandoned? Rasheeda asked, her voice cracking. Yandy stood and reached out, placing a hand on her arm. Because I let the noise take over. I let the show come before the sisterhood. There it was, the truth, raw, painful, unrehearsed. A knock. We're rolling in 10, the director said. Rasheeda looked at Yandy. We can fix this, but only if we stop performing. No more secrets, Yandy whispered. No more alliances, Rasheeda agreed. They stepped out of the room together, into the blinding lights, into the storm. And this time, they weren't sure what scene they were walking into, because the next take wasn't scripted. It was real, and real hurts way more than TV ever could. The lights were on, the cameras were rolling, and the audience had no idea that the biggest story of the season had already happened off screen. Yandy and Rasheeda stepped back into their marks, their bodies stiff, their faces composed only because they had to be. The script called for a calm group discussion. But calm wasn't in the room anymore. Calm had walked out the door with trust. Jessica was already seated across from them, her legs crossed, that smug look painted on her face, like war paint. Jock stood just off stage, arms folded, eyes sharp. Cease and Mendeces hovered nearby, both sensing that the tension hadn't cooled, it had just gone underground. As the host launched into her opening lines, fans watching from home had no idea the real script was unraveling in whispers, side glances, and bruised hearts. The lines were said. The scene moved forward, but every word out of Yandy's mouth came wrapped in the ache of betrayal. Every pause in Rasheeda's delivery was loaded with hesitation. After the segment wrapped, Yandy retreated backstage. She didn't even bother heading to her dressing room. She just needed space. Quiet, a moment to breathe. But quiet doesn't last long in this world. Yandy, Money called softly from down the hall. They want you in makeup again. Yandy closed her eyes, biting back tears. Tell them they'll get me when I'm ready. Money hesitated, then sat beside her. You know people are talking, right? Of course they are, Yandy said. They always are. I mean, everyone, Money whispered. The crew, the cast, even producers. They saw the fight. They heard the way Rasheeda came at you. There's talk about what? Yandy interrupted. About how she chose chaos over friendship. No, Money said quietly. About how this might be your last season. Yandy froze. She had heard whispers, but she thought they were just noise. Now, hearing it from someone inside someone close, it hit different. Is that what they want? She asked, her voice barely holding. No, Money said, but it's what Jessica wants, and she's trying hard to make sure the higher-ups listen to her version of the story. Yandy leaned her head back against the wall. So now it's a war for airtime. It always was, Cisa added, suddenly appearing beside them. It's just that now, it's gotten personal. Meanwhile, in a different corner of the studio, Rasheeda was sitting in front of the mirror. Her reflection looked tired. Her shoulders slumped, the adrenaline had faded, and all she could see was the look on Yandy's face, the betrayal, the devastation. Jessica walked in without knocking. That went well, she said, sipping a smoothie like nothing had happened. Rasheeda didn't respond. You okay? Jessica asked, though it didn't sound like concern, it sounded like control. I'm fine, Rasheeda said. You sure? Jessica pressed. Because you look like someone who just second-guessed everything. I didn't second-guess anything, Rasheeda snapped, standing. Jessica raised her eyebrows. Relax, you made your choice. Don't start wobbling now. Rasheeda turned away, suddenly aware of how deep she'd allowed herself to sink. She was knee-deep in alliances, whispers, and damage she didn't know how to undo. Back, near the stage, the host was handed a new segment envelope. The next round of the loyalty challenge. It sounded playful, but nothing about this challenge was light. Yandy and Rasheeda were told to report to the center stage. 2 chairs, a small table with 3 envelopes, 1 marked challenge rules, 1 proof of loyalty, and 1 consequences. The lights dimmed. The audience leaned in. The host smiled, but her voice was serious. Tonight, we test whether broken bonds can be mended in the harshest light of all, public scrutiny. Yandy reached for the envelope marked challenge rules and opened it with trembling fingers. It read, for 1 full scene. Yandy must shadow Rasheeda's storyline, no speaking, no interrupting, just support. Rasheeda opened hers. Reveal, a never before shared truth on camera about your past. No script, no rehearsal, raw. The air tightened. Jessica, seated off to the side, smirked like she already knew what was coming. As the cameras rolled, Yandy followed Rasheeda into the makeup trailer set, assisting her quietly. She held her dress, fetched her script, straightened her jewelry. Not once did she speak, not once did she break the rule. Rasheeda sat in the chair, staring into the mirror. Then she said it, softly, barely audible. When I found out Yandy leaked my personal texts to producers, it broke me. The entire set went still. Yandy flinched, her hands trembling as she adjusted a hanger. I didn't think I could trust her again, Rasheeda continued, but I forgave her. Because deep down, I thought our bond was worth saving. The crew didn't know if they should keep filming. The director just whispered, let it roll. Yandy stepped back, eyes shimmering. She didn't speak, she just nodded. Respect, regret, recognition. Later, when they were off camera, Jock pulled Yandy aside. That was brave. He said. Yandy shook her head. No, what she said? That was brave. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tension and quiet glances. Yandy followed through with every step of the shadowing task. She stayed silent. She offered help. She supported Dot, and when Rasheeda's lines faltered during a tense scene, Yandy leaned in and whispered the cue just loud enough to guide her back. The director caught it. Nice teamwork, he said, unaware of the emotional history behind that one quiet whisper. As the episode wrapped, the host returned to center stage. Now for consequences, she announced, pulling a final card. If either of you fails to uphold this bond this week, you must issue a public apology and reveal one fear live. Backstage after the taping, in a private green room, Yandy and Rasheeda sat on opposite ends of a couch. Jock entered, setting 2 bottles of water down. "How you feeling?" he asked. "Numb," Yandy said. "Exposed," Rasheeda added. They looked at each other. "I didn't realize how much I needed her until I had to support her," Yandy admitted. "And I didn't realize how much I hurt her until I had to admit my own damage," Rasheeda whispered. The crew member entered with a tablet. "Your loyalty task is trending," she said. The screen lit up with comments. "Yandy's loyalty is unmatched." Rasheeda's confession, "That was real. This ain't reality TV anymore. This is real life." Yandy let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Maybe this challenge isn't about drama after all," she said. "Maybe it's about healing." The next day, a new segment was announced, a live Q&A with the audience. One-on-one, no edits, no cuts. The hardest truths on display, and Rasheeda took their seats on set. A stack of cue cards sat on a small table between them. The host smiled, but the tension was thick. "Yandy, your question for Rasheeda. What do you regret most on this show?" Rasheeda didn't hesitate, doubting Yandy when she needed me the most. The audience let out a soft, collective gasp, then the question flipped. "Rasheeda, your question for Yandy. What strength do I bring to our team that nobody sees?" Yandy smiled, for real this time. "Resilience," she said. "You bend, but you don't break. And that gives all of us the strength to keep going." Then came the twist. The host smiled and delivered it like a punchline. "Jessica will now join you for the final question." Gasps from the audience. Jessica strutted onto the stage, heels clicking, face unreadable. The host read from the final card. "Describe a time when you felt closest to each other." Despite conflict, Jessica blinked, then answered first. "When Rasheeda showed up for me when my mom was in the hospital," she said. "No cameras, just care." Yandy turned to Rasheeda. "I felt closest when you defended me online. When nobody else did." Silence, heavy, emotional. Jessica nodded slowly. "Maybe loyalty isn't about taking sides. Maybe it's about showing up." For a second, just a second, the air shifted. The 3 women looked at each other. No longer opponents on a reality show, but people, trying to rebuild something real. The host smiled. "You've taken the chaos and turned it into connection." The audience stood. The applause was real. But backstage, that's where the real battle still lived. Because while fans were celebrating forgiveness, someone was already planning the next betrayal. And Jessica, she wasn't done. The cameras had barely cooled, and already the air buzzed with something new, something unsaid. Jessica may have offered a moment of reflection, but nobody in that building believed her story was over, especially not Yandy. Backstage, producers huddled behind monitors, watching the unexpected audience reaction flood in comments, hashtags, trending clips. They hadn't planned for a redemption arc, but the raw honesty had sparked something. The loyalty challenge was supposed to be a gimmick. Now it was rewriting the narrative in real time. And then came the envelope. Final task, final test, final storm, plan and execute an off-camera charity event dashed together. No scripts, no edits, no safety net. Yandy read the instructions twice. Rasheeda looked up from her phone and whispered, This we can do." Within 48 hours, they had a blueprint, a community arts workshop, paint traps, spoken word corners, a DJ booth with old-school R&B. Cameras were allowed, but only in the background. The goal wasn't the spotlight, it was the message. They called it Frosts for good, a nod to both their last names and a colder past. They were finally thawing. The day of the event, the sun came out early, a small miracle. Kids lined up at the doors, not knowing they were about to walk into something historic. Yandy stood by the welcome table, Rasheeda on her right. No glam squads. No reality TV filters, just 2 women, a stack of paintbrushes, and a promise to show up. Jock stood in the back with his phone out, filming everything quietly, respectfully. Money passed out paint aprons. Cease managed the live stream. Even Jessica showed up unannounced, posted up by the juice bar, watching from a distance. Yandy helped a little girl paint a canvas with the words "Be Seen." Rasheeda held a mic as a teenage boy performed his first poem about abandonment. The crew captured every second, not as drama but as legacy, and then the moment hit. Rasheeda turned to the crowd, microphone in hand. "I never thought I'd be standing next to Yandy like this again," she said, voice cracking. "But when the noise fades, what matters is who shows up for you in silence." Yandy joined her on stage. Reality TV made us characters. But this is who we really are, sisters, fighters, flawed but loyal when it counts. The audience clapped, but it wasn't just polite applause. It was relief. It was recognition. It was real. Later, in a quiet corner of the venue, Jock caught Jessica watching from afar. Her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were unsure. He walked over. You came. I did, she said. Didn't expect to feel this much. Jock nodded. Maybe it's time you stopped playing the villain. Jessica laughed once short, almost bitter. You know the villain always gets the last word, right? He didn't respond. He didn't need to, because Jessica already knew this time. She wasn't in control of the story. Back at the studio, the final taping of the loyalty challenge began. The set was warm. The lights were soft, the host's tone gentler than ever. You've completed every challenge, she said. You've shown us conflict, pain, growth, and healing. But before we close this chapter, there's one last question. She turned to Yandy and Rasheeda, seated center stage. What does loyalty mean to you now? Yandy took a breath. It means staying when it's easier to leave. Rasheeda added, it means believing someone can change even if they hurt you. The host nodded. And will you carry that forward? Yandy and Rasheeda reached across the couch and locked hands. Yes, they said. In unison. No hesitation. The audience rose in a standing ovation. The lights dimmed, the cameras cut, and just like that, the Frost family was whole again, but it wasn't the end. Because as the audience filed out, phones buzzed, alerts pinged, blogs lit up, a leaked voice note. It wasn't new, but it was timed perfectly. Jessica's voice, saying, let them play, sisters. I'll let the world see the footage next week. Suddenly, everything that had been healed teetered again. The truce threatened. The trust trembling. Back in her dressing room, Yandy stood frozen. She held her phone like it was poison. She's not done, she whispered. Rasheeda's face hardened. Then we stand together this time. No sides. Yandy asked. No sides, Rasheeda said. And in that moment, it didn't matter what Jessica had in her phone. It didn't matter what she dropped next week. Because for once, just once, the sisterhood was stronger than the sabotage. The season closed on that image. Not a fight, not a slap, not a meltdown. But two women walking side by side. Into the next storm. Because in love and hip-hop, peace is never permanent, but loyalty. That's the only thing worth fighting for.